The morning sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden glow over the city streets. The air smelled faintly of fresh bread and wet pavement from an early sprinkle of rain. People moved about quickly, rushing to start their day. Among them, a young girl walked with careful steps, her white cane tapping rhythmically against the sidewalk. She was blind, but she had learned to navigate the world with skill and confidence. Every street corner, every doorway, every familiar path felt like second nature to her. She was a quiet child, often keeping to herself, but her presence had a certain calmness that drew people in. Passers-by sometimes smiled at her gently, careful not to startle her as she passed. She was independent, always striving to do things on her own without asking for help, even if someone offered. Today she had an appointment to meet a friend at a small cafe across town. She loved mornings like this, when the world felt fresh and possibilities seemed endless. As she moved through the busy street, a group of people walking ahead of her turned their heads and gave her friendly nods. She returned a small smile, feeling a little warmth from the gestures. She tapped her cane steadily on the sidewalk, listening carefully to the rhythm of the city, the distant honk of a horn, the chatter of pedestrians, the faint hum of a bus engine. To her, each sound was a guide, a way to keep her place in the bustling cityscape. But as she approached a street corner, she felt something she didn't expect. The steady rhythm of her day shifted. A police officer was leaning against a streetlight, arms crossed, with a look that made her stomach tighten. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, with a presence that seemed to dominate the space around him. At first, she thought he was just standing there minding his own business, but as she drew closer, she heard his voice sharp and mocking. "Well, what do we have here?" the officer said. His tone was heavy with sarcasm. "A little girl blind as a bat trying to walk alone?" The words made her heart race. She stopped for a moment, gripping her cane tightly. Her pulse quickened and a familiar fear crept up her spine. She had faced challenges in the past, but this was different. This was public. This was a figure of authority speaking down to her in front of everyone. The officer stepped closer, blocking her path, a smirk playing across his face. "You really think you can navigate the world without help?" he taunted, glancing at the small crowd of morning pedestrians who had started to notice the interaction. Some froze, unsure whether to intervene. Others looked uncomfortable, wishing they could help but afraid of making things worse. The girl's mind raced. She wanted to keep moving to avoid confrontation, but the officer's presence felt heavy, suffocating even. She tried to step around him carefully, tapping her cane to guide herself. I'm just walking," she said softly, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her chest. The officer laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Walking alone? In my city?" His tone made her stomach twist. "You think you're brave? You think anyone should let you wander around like this? Pathetic." People began to gather, a few at a distance watching silently. No one stepped forward. Some were whispering to each other, their faces showing unease. The girl's mother had taught her to be cautious in such situations, to avoid escalating tension. But inside, her heart ached. Why was someone treating her like she was less than human just because she couldn't see? She gripped her cane tighter, trying to focus on her steps, but the officer moved to follow her. "Where are you going anyway?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Trying to get somewhere without causing trouble?" "Not on my watch." Her voice trembled slightly, but she answered anyway. I'm meeting a friend at a cafe. I can walk there myself," the officer sneered, shaking his head. "A friend, huh? You think anyone would let you handle life alone? You're going to learn the hard way that the world isn't kind to people like you." At that moment, a few bystanders looked around nervously. A man holding his coffee muttered under his breath, "That's not right," but didn't move closer. Another woman shook her head, clearly upset but unsure how to intervene. The girl felt the weight of helplessness pressing down. The officer's words were harsh, unfair, and cruel. The shame of being mocked publicly was overwhelming. She wished the ground would open and swallow her whole. The officer suddenly moved closer, looming over her. "You know, I could make things really difficult for you right now," he said, his tone low but menacing. "And nobody would stop me. You're alone. No one cares about what happens to you." The girl froze. She could feel every eye in the small crowd watching, some silently judging, some empathetic, but no one moving to help. Her mind raced. How could someone like him have power over her life so easily? She felt small, vulnerable, and exposed. Her hands trembled slightly, but she tried to stay calm, focusing on the familiar tap of her cane against the sidewalk. "Please, I just want to go to the cafe," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the city. The officer's expression hardened, his smirk turning into a frown. "Oh, you'll go somewhere, all right," he said. "Just not without learning your place." Suddenly, a quiet murmur ran through the small crowd. A few people started shifting, whispering to each other. Something was changing. The tension that had been building moments ago seemed to ripple outward. The officer noticed the attention and straightened, looking around at the gathering crowd. For the first time, he seemed slightly uneasy, as if sensing that the moment was no longer entirely under his control. The girl's heart pounded, her body tense, as she braced for what might come next. She had faced difficult situations before, but nothing like this. The fear, the humiliation, and the sense of powerlessness combined into a heavy weight that pressed on her chest. She wanted to cry out, to run, to hide, but her feet were steady and her hands gripped her cane firmly. She refused to let him see her break. As the officer advanced again, the sound of footsteps from the street drew everyone's attention. A ripple of awe and surprise moved through the crowd. Two men were approaching, their presence commanding and unmistakable. One was tall, broad, and muscular with a calm, confident expression. The other had a charisma that made the air feel charged, a quiet authority that made people instinctively step aside. It didn't take long for the bystanders to realize who they were: John Cena and The Rock. The girl's eyes widened slightly, even though she couldn't see them. She could feel the change in the air, the shift in energy. The officer turned as well, noticing the newcomers. His smirk faltered for the first time. The confident, intimidating stance he had carried moments ago seemed to waver. He glanced at the two men, clearly realizing that he had underestimated the situation. "Hey," one of the men called out, his voice calm but firm. "Step away from her." The other added, "That's enough. She doesn't deserve this." The street seemed to hold its breath. The commotion had drawn the attention of more pedestrians, some pausing with their coffee cups, others leaving their morning errands to see what was happening. The girl stood quietly, gripping her white cane, but now her fear was mingled with a cautious hope. She could feel a shift in the air. Tension, yes, but also the unmistakable presence of protection. John Cena and The Rock were calm, but there was a quiet intensity about them. They didn't rush forward aggressively. They didn't shout or threaten. Instead, they moved deliberately, using their presence and confidence to shift the situation without escalating it. It was as though the street itself recognized that these two men carried authority, not just in strength but in character. The officer, still standing with a mix of defiance and uncertainty, tried to maintain control. He cleared his throat, attempting to assert dominance. "You two shouldn't get involved. This doesn't concern you," he said, his voice trying to sound commanding. John Cena stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "It concerns all of us when someone is being treated unfairly," he said. "This girl doesn't deserve to be mocked or threatened, and you need to step back." The officer bristled, puffing out his chest. But even as he tried to respond, The Rock's presence made him hesitate. The Rock's gaze was steady, unwavering, and it carried the kind of authority that didn't require yelling. "Back off," The Rock said. "Now, this stops here." The girl's pulse quickened, but it was no longer just fear. Relief began to seep in, warming her from the inside out. She could feel the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. Someone was standing up for her, someone she didn't even know, and yet their courage was enough to make the officer pause. The crowd began to murmur, whispers of disbelief and admiration spreading like wildfire. People were recording with their phones, not to mock, but to capture the lesson unfolding in real life. It was a rare thing, a moment where bystanders saw courage, fairness, and the power of standing up for someone in need. The officer stepped closer again, perhaps thinking that sheer size and presence could intimidate the two men. "I'm a cop," he said, voice rising. "You can't tell me what to do. I have authority here." John Cena shook his head slowly. "Authority doesn't give anyone the right to belittle or harm someone who can't defend themselves," he said. "You're supposed to protect, not intimidate. Right now, you're failing that duty." The words seemed to hang in the air. A few pedestrians gasped softly, realizing the truth in them. The officer's jaw tightened. He was not used to being called out publicly, and certainly not by people who were more powerful in ways that mattered than brute force alone. The Rock stepped slightly to the side of the girl, positioning himself in a protective stance. "You hear that?" he asked the officer. "She's a human being. She deserves respect. And if you think otherwise, you're wrong." For a moment, the officer said nothing. The silence was thick, punctuated only by the soft tapping of the girl's cane as she shifted her weight slightly. She could feel the eyes of the crowd on everyone involved, sensing the tension and waiting for what would happen next. A few pedestrians finally found their courage. An elderly man cleared his throat, stepping closer. "Leave her alone," he said quietly but firmly. A couple of women nodded in agreement. Their small acts of bravery, combined with the presence of the two men, began to erode the officer's authority in that moment. The girl's mother, who had been following at a distance, rushed closer now. Her hand found her daughter's shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "It's okay," she whispered. "Someone is standing up for you." The officer's smirk faltered. He glanced around at the crowd, seeing the number of witnesses, the recordings, the disapproving faces. His earlier confidence began to crumble under the weight of public scrutiny. John Cena and The Rock exchanged a brief, understanding look. There was no need for words. Both knew the importance of staying calm, of not escalating while ensuring the girl felt safe. Cena raised his hand slightly, signaling for the officer to step back. "This is your chance to do the right thing," he said. "You can either step aside and allow her to continue safely, or you can continue this and face the consequences of your actions." The officer hesitated. He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. His uniform, once a symbol of unquestioned authority in his mind, now felt heavy. The presence of the two men, the attention of the crowd, and the courage of those who had spoken out created a pressure he hadn't anticipated. The girl felt a surge of hope. She had been walking through fear, humiliation, and doubt, but now she sensed that the situation was beginning to change. Her confidence, though small, grew with every step the officer faltered. She realized that courage could appear in unexpected ways, not just in herself, but in others willing to step forward when it mattered most. John Cena spoke again, his tone calm but firm. "Step back. Right now. Show her respect. Show her dignity. That's all she deserves." The Rock added, "And remember, this isn't just about her. It's about every person watching. Every choice you make right now tells everyone who sees it what kind of person you are." The officer muttered something under his breath, trying to regain composure, but his words lacked conviction. He took a hesitant step back. The crowd exhaled, the tension easing slightly. A few people even smiled softly, sensing that justice, at least in this moment, had been served. The girl's mother knelt beside her, whispering encouragement. "You see? They've got your back," she said. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." The girl nodded, her fingers tightening slightly around her cane. Relief washed over her, mixing with the lingering adrenaline. For the first time since the incident began, she felt the possibility of safety. She could continue on her way without fear, and she could do so knowing that someone truly understood the importance of standing up for what is right. John Cena moved slightly in front of the girl, his stance protective but non-threatening. "You're safe now," he said, addressing her quietly. "You can keep going and nobody will stop you." The Rock positioned himself to cover the other side. "Go ahead," he said firmly, his voice carrying authority. "Walk freely. You have every right to." The officer, now completely subdued, took a final step back. His earlier aggression had faded into resignation. He knew that his behavior had been witnessed, that it had been judged, and that he had no power in this situation anymore. His eyes flicked briefly to the crowd, noting the disapproving glances, the phone's recording, and the silent but powerful lessons being observed. The girl's mother helped her daughter take a careful step forward, cane tapping the pavement with renewed rhythm. Each step was a victory, a reclaiming of her independence and confidence. She felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The morning that had begun with fear and humiliation was slowly transforming into one of empowerment and relief. John Cena and The Rock stayed close, guiding her path without rushing, without intimidating. Their presence was a quiet reassurance, a buffer between her and the world that had tried to harm her. Pedestrians began to applaud softly, some out of relief, others out of admiration. The lesson was clear. Courage, respect, and empathy could confront cruelty, and it worked. As they guided the girl past the tense scene, A few people approached her mother quietly. "I'm glad someone stepped in," one woman said. "It was terrible what that officer did." The mother nodded, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Yes, but thanks to these men, my daughter is safe. She's brave and she's not alone." The girl could feel the strength in their words and actions. She realized that courage wasn't just about standing up for yourself. Sometimes it was about letting others who cared step in. She also understood that even in moments of fear and helplessness, hope could appear, sometimes in the most unexpected forms. John Cena gave a reassuring nod to the girl and her mother. The tension in the air was thick as John Cena and The Rock positioned themselves firmly in front of the girl. She could sense the seriousness in their steps, the calm authority that radiated from both of them. The officer, still trying to maintain his composure, shuffled slightly, the arrogance that had dominated moments ago now giving way to hesitation. For the first time, he realized that he was outmatched, not by brute strength alone, but by presence, confidence, and moral authority. The girl's heart still pounded, but she felt a quiet reassurance that someone was there for her. The Rock leaned slightly forward, keeping his voice steady, clear and commanding. "Listen to me," he said. "You are not allowed to treat her this way. Do you understand? No one deserves this." The words weren't shouted, but they carried weight, filling the street and silencing murmurs from the growing crowd. The officer's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to speak, likely to justify himself, but the calm, unwavering gaze of John Cena made him hesitate. Cena spoke next, his voice firm but measured, not a shout, not a demand, but a statement of truth. "Authority doesn't give you the right to demean or harass anyone. Your job is to protect and serve, not intimidate. This girl has done nothing wrong. Step back." The officer's hands trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. He looked at the growing crowd, sensing their eyes on him. Phones were raised, capturing every moment, the whispers of onlookers growing into a quiet chorus of disapproval. The girl, despite being blind, could feel the shift. Where once there had been tension, uncertainty, and fear, now there was a feeling of justice slowly settling in. The Rock took another careful step forward, not to threaten, but to assert protection. "She's a human being," he said. "She has every right to move freely without fear. You will not make her feel small or powerless." For the girl, the words were like a shield. Her pulse slowed slightly, the grip on her cane firm but steady. She felt a sense of empowerment, not her own entirely, but shared through the courage of those standing beside her. She realized that sometimes courage could come from others, and that accepting protection wasn't a sign of weakness. The officer's face reddened, his earlier confidence eroding under the scrutiny and moral clarity radiating from Cena and The Rock. He shifted his weight uneasily, trying to find an argument, a justification, anything that would allow him to save face. "I'm a police officer," he muttered more defensively than convincingly. "I'm enforcing rules. You can't tell me how to do my job." John Cena's voice remained calm but forceful. "Enforcing rules doesn't mean hurting or mocking someone. You have power, yes, but it comes with responsibility, and you are failing to use that power rightly." His words were simple, human, undeniable. They didn't appeal to authority, but to fairness, decency, and the inherent understanding of what was right. The crowd leaned in slightly, hanging on every word. Some whispered affirmations, nodding their heads. Others raised their phones, ready to capture proof that courage and empathy could confront cruelty. The officer felt the eyes of dozens of strangers, each silently judging him, reflecting the impact of his choices in a way he hadn't expected. The girl's mother, who had been quietly watching, stepped forward to the edge of the group. She placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, squeezing gently. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe now. Don't be afraid." Her voice carried love, reassurance, and a quiet strength that matched the authority of the two men. The officer took another step forward, then paused. His words faltered. I'm just following procedures," he said almost apologetically. But the truth was evident, he had overstepped. The crowd, the two men, and the girl's evident bravery had exposed the cruelty of his actions. He could no longer maintain the pretense of power. The Rock's voice cut through the tension, calm yet firm. "Procedures don't give you permission to humiliate someone, and they certainly don't excuse cruelty. Right now you have a choice. Step back or continue being wrong. The choice is yours." For the first time, the officer hesitated. The small crowd was watching, waiting. The murmurs grew louder, a mixture of concern and support for the girl. Some bystanders finally stepped forward politely but firmly, urging the officer to leave her alone. It was a rare sight, civilians standing in solidarity with someone vulnerable, guided by the moral authority of two well-known figures. The girl's pulse steadied further. She could feel the tension around her shifting completely. The officer, realizing he could no longer intimidate, finally stepped back. The crowd breathed collectively and a few people quietly applauded, some wiping tears from their eyes. Relief flooded through her, replacing the fear that had gripped her moments ago. John Cena gave a reassuring nod to the girl. "It's over now," he said softly. "You're safe. Keep going. You deserve to be respected." The Rock stepped beside her, protective but calm. "No one should ever treat you like that. You have every right to move freely and confidently." His words weren't just for her. They were for everyone witnessing the event, a lesson in courage, empathy, and the power of intervention. The officer muttered something inaudible under his breath and finally retreated. His earlier aggression was gone, replaced by discomfort and the awareness that his actions had been publicly judged. The lesson had been delivered. Cruelty has consequences, and courage has a way of shining through, even in ordinary moments. The girl's mother led her a few steps forward, letting her regain control of her own path. "See," she whispered. "You didn't have to be afraid. You're stronger than you know." The girl nodded, feeling a sense of calm she hadn't felt since the confrontation began. She realized that being blind didn't make her weak. It only made the kindness, courage, and protection she received more meaningful. She had been seen, respected, and defended, not just by strangers, but by people willing to act when others might have stayed silent. John Cena and The Rock stayed with her for a few more steps, ensuring she could move safely past the tense scene. They didn't make it about themselves. Their presence was purely protective, guiding, and teaching. It was a real-life example of empathy and courage, and the girl understood that she had witnessed something rare and powerful. Bystanders continued to murmur, some quietly praising the men for their actions, others reflecting on their own behavior and choices. The impact was immediate. Witnesses had seen injustice confronted and courage demonstrated. The lesson rippled outward, touching everyone in the crowd. The girl's mother smiled through tears. "Thank you," she whispered to Cena and The Rock. "You've shown her that there are good people who stand up for what's right." John Cena nodded, a warm but firm smile on his face. "She's brave," he said. "All we did was make sure she could see it too." The Rock's expression softened. "Remember this," he added. "Courage comes in many forms. Today she saw it in action, and so did everyone watching." The girl felt a spark of confidence she hadn't experienced before. The fear that had gripped her was replaced by a sense of empowerment. She realized that even when the world seemed unfair, there were people willing to confront cruelty. She also understood that she could carry the lessons she had witnessed, using them to guide her own choices in the future. The officer finally stepped away completely, leaving the girl and her mother free to continue on their path. His presence was no longer threatening, but the lesson lingered, a reminder of the impact of choices, courage, and standing up for what is right. The girl took a deep breath and began walking again, her cane tapping steadily on the sidewalk. She felt the support around her, both from her mother and the two men who had stood up for her. The crowd began to disperse, some whispering encouragement, others shaking their heads at the injustice they had witnessed. The crowd that had gathered on the sidewalk began to shift, but a quiet energy lingered in the air. People whispered to one another, exchanging glances that reflected both relief and admiration. They had witnessed something rare, courage confronting cruelty and empathy standing firm against intimidation. The girl stood a few steps ahead of her mother, cane tapping steadily against the pavement, feeling an unfamiliar confidence rising within her. John Cena and The Rock remained nearby, not lingering unnecessarily but ensuring that the girl could safely continue her journey. Their presence alone reminded everyone that acts of bravery mattered, and that standing up for what was right could create ripples far beyond the immediate moment. The girl's mother leaned down, her voice calm but filled with emotion. "Look at the world around you," she said softly. "See how people are reacting? This is what happens when someone stands up for you. Courage is contagious." The girl nodded, letting the words sink in. She realized she could feel a difference in the way the street seemed to breathe around her. The tension from earlier had dissipated, replaced by a mixture of respect, reflection, and quiet awe. People were beginning to understand the importance of what had happened. A few of the bystanders had stepped forward more confidently now. One man, holding a bag of groceries, approached cautiously. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner," he admitted. "I didn't know what to do, but seeing them stand up, it makes me want to do better." A woman nodded in agreement. "We all have a choice," she said. "We can stand by or we can act. Today we saw what courage looks like." The girl felt a warmth in her chest. She had been humiliated, mocked, and made to feel powerless. Yet the intervention had shown her something vital. Even in moments of fear, people could act with integrity and bravery. She had been given a gift, not just protection, but a lesson in human kindness that would stay with her forever. John Cena noticed the girl's quiet observation and bent slightly to speak to her, his voice gentle. "You've seen courage today," he said. "Not just ours, but yours too. You kept moving, you stayed strong, and you faced fear with bravery. That matters more than you realize." The girl's fingers tightened slightly on her cane. Even though she couldn't see his face, she could feel the sincerity in his words. For the first time since the incident began, she felt truly understood and respected. She realized that bravery wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and persistent. The Rock stepped closer, his expression kind but serious. "And remember," he said, "it's not just about what we did today. It's about the choices you make in the future and how you carry yourself. Courage is contagious. Kindness spreads. Every action you take can make a difference." The girl's mother smiled, tears in her eyes. "You see?" she whispered. "You're not just learning today. Everyone here is learning from you too." Around them, the crowd was beginning to disperse, but their faces reflected something they would carry with them for a long time. People were talking quietly among themselves, discussing the courage they had witnessed, the lessons about respect and empathy, and the power of intervention. The impact of the event extended beyond the girl and the immediate confrontation. It was now a teaching moment for everyone present. The girl paused for a moment, letting her cane rest lightly against the pavement. She listened to the sounds of the city, footsteps, distant conversations, the soft hum of traffic, and felt a sense of peace. The world still had dangers. The crowd still contained people who might not understand. But today she had experienced the power of standing together, of courage meeting cruelty, and the lasting impact of empathy in action. John Cena and The Rock guided the girl and her mother a few more steps down the sidewalk, making sure they were out of the officer's immediate presence. Though the cop had retreated, the lesson had been clearly delivered. Abuse and cruelty could be confronted, and there were people willing to do the right thing. The girl's mother looked at her daughter, pride shining through every feature. "Today wasn't just about being protected," she said softly. "It was about learning that you are valued, that your dignity matters, and that you have every right to be safe. Never forget that." The girl nodded, taking a deep breath. She could feel the weight of the morning lifting, replaced by a quiet determination. She understood now that fear could be met with courage, and cruelty could be met with kindness and strength. The lessons of the day were not just for her, but for everyone who had witnessed it. A small group of children had gathered nearby, curious and wide-eyed. They had seen the confrontation and were now whispering among themselves. One of them pointed toward the girl and her mother, then to John Cena and The Rock. "Did you see that?" the child asked. "They stood up for her. They didn't let the mean man scare her." Another child nodded, eyes bright. "I want to be brave like that too," they said. "I want to help people who need it." The girl smiled softly, feeling the ripple of courage spreading even further. She realized that her experience, though frightening, had become a moment of inspiration not only for herself but for others who might witness or hear about it. Even without seeing, she could feel the energy of hope and empowerment growing around her. John Cena crouched slightly, addressing the children in a gentle tone. "Courage isn't about being the biggest or the strongest," he said. "It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Remember that, and you'll always be brave." The Rock nodded in agreement. "And kindness is just as important as courage. How you treat others defines who you are. Protect each other, respect each other, and you'll make the world better." The children nodded eagerly, absorbing the lessons. Even the adults nearby were talking quietly as hearing what they had witnessed, discussing how courage and empathy could make a difference in their own lives. The confrontation had transformed into a public lesson, a live demonstration of moral integrity and human decency. The girl felt a sense of pride swelling within her. She had been vulnerable, scared, and exposed, yet she had been given a chance to experience protection and kindness in a real, tangible way. She realized that the world could be cruel, but it could also be full of people willing to act with integrity. The difference often came down to individual choices, and those choices could create lasting impact. The day was settling into a soft, late afternoon glow. The city streets were quieter now, the bustle of the morning and early afternoon giving way to a gentle rhythm. The girl walked steadily beside her mother, cane tapping lightly on the pavement, each step filled with newfound confidence. She felt a weight lifting off her shoulders, the fear and humiliation from earlier, now replaced with a quiet sense of empowerment. Even though she couldn't see the faces of the people around her, she could sense the world had shifted slightly. The energy of courage, empathy, and integrity that had been set in motion earlier was still present, like an invisible wave that touched everyone who had been near. The intervention of John Cena and The Rock had transformed not only her morning, but the perspective of the crowd who had witnessed the event. The girl's mother kept a gentle hold on her hand, walking slowly to match her pace. "You handled yourself beautifully," she said softly. "It's okay to feel afraid, but look at how you carried yourself. You didn't let him win. You didn't let fear control you." The girl felt a sense of pride swell within her. She had faced cruelty, intimidation, and humiliation, but she had not been defeated. Even in moments when the world seemed harsh and unkind, she had been defended by kindness and courage. She realized that strength could come in many forms, sometimes from within and sometimes from those willing to step in when you are vulnerable. As they walked, the girl's thoughts returned to the officer. She couldn't see his expression now, but she could imagine the discomfort, the realization that his actions had been publicly witnessed and judged. He had been confronted not with anger or violence, but with calm authority, fairness, and moral courage. The lesson had been delivered clearly. Cruelty cannot stand when confronted by integrity. The mother squeezed her daughter's hand. "And remember," she said, "this isn't just about what they did for you. It's about what you can carry forward. You've seen courage, and now you know that kindness and integrity have power too. One act can inspire many others." The girl nodded slowly. She thought of the children nearby, the bystanders, the adults who had quietly spoken up, and everyone who had witnessed the event. Courage and empathy had rippled outward, affecting people she would never meet, leaving a lasting impression. Even though she was just a young girl navigating the city streets, she had been at the center of a lesson that would resonate far beyond her own experience. She felt the presence of the two men, though they had begun to step back now. John Cena gave a nod of reassurance from a short distance away. The Rock's expression was calm, proud, and steady. They had done what needed to be done, protecting her, confronting wrongdoing, and teaching a subtle but powerful lesson to everyone present. Their impact was immediate, but the real effect would last much longer. The girl realized she didn't feel scared anymore. Fear had been replaced by understanding, not just of what courage looked like in others, but of her own resilience. She had been mocked, demeaned, and threatened, yet she had experienced the power of protection, empathy, and moral authority. She could feel a quiet determination growing within her, a sense that she could face challenges in the future with courage, no matter how daunting. Her mother spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. "Life will sometimes place people in front of you who are cruel or unkind, but you've seen that there are also people willing to stand up for what's right. Remember that courage isn't just about fighting back physically. It's about knowing what's right, being patient, and standing firm when others need you." The girl thought about the moments when John Cena and The Rock had stepped forward. They hadn't yelled, they hadn't lost their temper, and they hadn't sought recognition. They had acted with calm authority, using their presence, their words, and their integrity to change the course of a frightening situation. That lesson would stay with her forever, the understanding that courage and kindness could be more powerful than fear and cruelty. As they walked toward a quieter street, away from the scene, the girl's mother continued, "And you'll carry this with you. Every time you face something difficult, remember this day. Remember that there are people willing to help, and remember that you can also make choices that reflect bravery and empathy. The world isn't always easy, but it can be better if we act with courage." The girl let out a small breath, the kind that comes from finally feeling at peace after tension and fear. She realized that even in her vulnerability, she had been seen, valued, and defended. The earlier humiliation had been transformed into empowerment, thanks not only to the men who had intervened, but also to the lesson they had demonstrated for everyone present. Her mother smiled, looking down at her. "I hope you understand how special this moment is," she said. "It's not just about being protected. It's about witnessing integrity in action and feeling what it means to be treated with respect." The girl nodded, tapping her cane steadily. She thought about the people who had been nearby, the strangers who had watched, the children who had seen the example of courage, the adults who had spoken quietly but firmly. The intervention had created a ripple effect, spreading lessons about kindness, empathy, and moral courage far beyond the immediate moment. Even though the officer had retreated, the memory of his behavior lingered. But it was no longer a source of fear. Instead, it served as a reminder of the contrast between cruelty and courage, showing clearly the consequences of choice and action. The girl understood that justice didn't always come immediately, but acts of integrity and bravery could transform situations in profound ways. As they reached the entrance to the cafe where she had intended to meet her friend, the girl paused for a moment. She could feel the warmth of the sun on her face, the steady rhythm of the city around her, and the quiet sense of accomplishment within herself. She had walked through fear, stood firm, and experienced protection and empathy in the most human way possible. John Cena and The Rock approached one last time, making sure she was safely positioned before they would step away. Cena spoke softly. "Keep walking with confidence. You've seen courage today and you have it in you too." The Rock added, "And remember, kindness and integrity matter as much as strength. Carry that with you and you'll make a difference wherever you go." The girl's mother hugged her gently. "See? You're safe and you've learned something important. Don't forget this feeling. It will guide you in the future." The girl could feel tears welling up, not from fear or frustration, but from relief and gratitude. She realized that the world, though sometimes harsh, could also be filled with people willing to act with bravery, compassion, and moral clarity. She had witnessed a moment that transformed fear into empowerment, helplessness into confidence, and humiliation into dignity. As they stepped into the cafe together, she felt a quiet determination to carry the lessons forward. She would face life's challenges with courage and empathy, remembering that even small actions could create ripples of change. She could sense that her experience, though frightening, had become a turning point, a moment that would shape her understanding of bravery and human kindness forever. Outside, the city continued its rhythm, but something subtle had shifted. Bystanders who had witnessed the intervention would remember it for years. The way courage and empathy had confronted cruelty, the way integrity had prevailed over intimidation, and the way one vulnerable girl had become the center of a powerful lesson. For the girl, every step forward was now a statement. She was moving not just physically through the city, but metaphorically through a world where courage, integrity, and kindness could prevail. The events of the day would remain with her, a guiding light whenever fear threatened to overshadow confidence. Her mother squeezed her hand one last time, smiling through tears. "This is a day we'll never forget," she said. "You've seen the best in people, and you've experienced strength in the gentlest ways. Remember that always." The girl nodded, feeling a sense of empowerment and hope unlike anything she had felt before. She had been mocked, threatened, and put in a position of vulnerability. Yet she had also been defended, uplifted, and shown what true courage and human decency looked like. And as they sat down at the cafe, the rhythm of life continuing around them, the girl realized something important. That even in the face of fear, even when the world seemed unkind, courage and empathy could transform everything. She had witnessed heroes in action, and more importantly, she had discovered her own capacity to understand, feel, and carry forward the lessons of bravery and kindness. John Cena and The Rock had left, their task complete, but their impact remained. The girl understood now that heroism was not always about grand gestures. Sometimes it was about standing firm, protecting those who are vulnerable,